Yesterday, when we graphed, we looked at trying to find two numbers that multiplied to give us this last number 2 and added to give us the middle number 7. But that was when there wasn't a number in front of the x squared. If we tried this right now, the only numbers that multiply to give us 2 are 1 and 2. And 1 plus 2 can't give us 7. So this is not going to work. But what we were really doing yesterday is we were multiplying the a value and the c value together. Yesterday, the a value was 1. And 1 times anything is whatever that number is. So now we need to multiply these two numbers together, and that's what our goal is for multiplication. So 3 times 2 is 6. We're looking for a pair of numbers that multiplies to give us 6 and adds up to 7. That would be 1 times 6. Now here's another tiny little curveball. We can't just do x plus 1 times x plus 6. Because if we did, so don't write this down yet, if we did x plus 1 times x plus 6, x times x is x squared, not 3x squared. So we really need this first blank and the first blank of the second set of parentheses. We need these two to become 3x squared. So one of them is probably going to be 3x, the other one is going to be x. When we multiply the 3x and this number, we're going to get either 1x or 6x. I think that one will end up being 6x. And when we do this number times x, we are going to get 1x. So 3x times what is 6x? 2. So that's going to be a plus 2 in that set of parentheses. Okay. X times what is 1x? 1. So our factored form is 3x plus 1, x plus 2. That method that we just did is called guess and check. And if our numbers are pretty small, guess and check really works pretty well. These numbers that we figured out helped us with what should the blanks produce. And then we used that to kind of go backwards to figure out what should go in the blanks. So this is called guess and check. It's kind of like a puzzle piece. And if you know how this factoring stuff works, you're just putting the numbers in certain places in the puzzle and then figuring out what's missing. Let's do one more doing guess and check, and then I'll show you another method, and then we can decide which method we prefer. Our first step is always going to be multiply your a value and your c value. So what is 2 times 5? 10. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us 10. Those same numbers need to add up to this middle number, negative 11. To get 10, we can do 1 times 5, or 1 times 10, or 2 times 5. Which one's going to give us negative 11? Negative 1 and negative 10. Okay. Here's the framework for our final answer. The first two blanks need to give us 2x squared. So what do you think those blanks are going to be? 2x and x. 2x times x is 2x squared. The middle number is created by multiplying the outer numbers and the inner numbers. So 2x times something and something times x. That's where we're going to get the negative 1x and the negative 10x. Now, would it make sense to put the negative 1x on this little swoop? Because 2x times something is not going to give us negative 1x. That doesn't make any sense. So we would put the negative 1x there and the negative 10x there. So this is using these numbers that we came up with in those little swoops. 2x times what would give us negative 10x? Negative 5. And x, and x times what is negative 1x? Negative 1. So our factored form is 2x minus 1 times x minus 5. Now, some people love guess and check because you probably won't even need to do all of this work. If you have this written over here, you can probably just look at this and say, all right, well, this bottom one is going to be the negative 10x, so that has to be negative 5. This one has to be the negative 1, so that's the negative 1. Some of you will really, really grab on to this guess and check and say, yes, this is how I'm doing it. Some of you might be thinking right now, this is a lot of steps, this is a lot of things to remember. So here's another method. This starts out exactly the same. We start by multiplying your A value times your C value. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us negative 6. Those same numbers have to add up to, what number is there in the middle?
1.
A 1. So this needs to be 2 and 3. The 2 needs to be negative. Okay, we are going to undo double distribution. We're going to undo FOIL. This middle term was created by adding negative 2x and positive 3x. So we're splitting this, we're uncombining the like terms. We still have the 2x squared in the front. We still have the minus 3 at the end. We're creating a 4-term expression instead of a 3-term expression. We're taking that middle term and unadding it together. Now I'm going to split this into 2 groups. Right after that second term, split it into 2 groups. Let's look at this first group. Ignore the 3x minus 3. Just look at the 2x squared minus 2x. What do 2x squared and minus 2x have in common? They both have an x. They both have a 2. So I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor of those 2 terms. So 2x squared, if I divide that by 2x, what would be left? Just x. Negative 2x divided by 2x is negative 1. If you multiply that back together, 2x times x is 2x squared, 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. So we're just undoing the distributive property in the left portion of that problem. Now let's look at this right side. What do 3x and negative 3 have in common? Just a 3, a positive 3. If I divide both of those by 3, 3x divided by 3 is x. Negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. Do you see anything interesting right here? Do you see how those parentheses are the same? They will always be the same. If you do this correctly, those parentheses will always be the same. And here's how we do our final step. We do 2x plus 3 times x minus 1. Okay. The 2x came from right here. The plus 3 came from right here. And the x plus 1 is that same thing that's in both terms. The question I commonly get at this point is, where did the other x minus 1 go? This statement here, I'm going to squiggle it. This is the distributive property fully written out. If I gave you 2x plus 3 times x minus 1 and said multiply this, you would do 2x times x and 2x times x minus 1. That's what's written right here. Then you would do 3 times x and 3 times negative 1. That's what's written right here. So that squiggled step, that is the distributive property fully written out. And our last step is just to collapse that distributive property back down into two sets of parentheses. Okay, so there's some definite pros and cons to both method. I personally like guess and check because I feel like it's quicker. It doesn't involve quite as many steps, and it's more like a puzzle, and my brain likes puzzles. Oops. Other people really like this. This is called factor by grouping, where you split it into 4 terms, and then you split it into 2 groups, the left group and the right group, because it works every time and it doesn't involve a whole lot of guessing. So let's do another one using factor by grouping, and then I'll kind of let you decide which method you want to try. So number 4, we start both methods the same. You have to multiply your A value with your C value. What is 6 times negative 5? Negative 30. So we need to multiply to get negative 30, and we need to add to get positive 13. So our first step is figuring out that puzzle. And this one is not obvious to me. This is getting to be bigger numbers, so it's not super obvious to me. So I'm going to do 1 times 30. I don't think that'll work. 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 5 times 6. Originally, I think, hey, 3 times 10, that's 13. But we have to multiply to get negative 30. So one of them has to be negative. And 10 minus 3 is 7. 3 minus 10 is negative 7. So it's not that one. What about 2 and 15? So 2, negative 2, and positive 15. Negative 2 times 15 is negative 30. Negative 2 plus 15 is 13. So I'm going to take this middle term and split it into negative 2x and positive 15x. Keep the minus 5 at the end. Keep the 6x squared in the beginning. So your first step is figure out what that magic pair of numbers is, and then split your middle term using that magic pair. Then we group it. We've got the left group and the right group. In the left group, what do 6x squared and negative 2x have in common? We can divide both of them by 2, and we can divide both of them by x. And then we're going to look at what is left if we pull those out of those 2 terms. So 6x squared, 6 divided by 2 is 3, x squared divided by x is x. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and x divided by x is 1. Goodness. Helpful hint, whatever symbol is right in front of the third term, you're going to use that symbol. What do 15x and negative 5 have in common? What could you divide out of both of those terms? A 5. 15x divided by 5 is 3x. Negative 5 divided by 5 is negative 1. Your final factored form is 2x plus 5 times 3x minus 1. This is a problem where guess and check might actually be a little bit more difficult. Because look at our first blanks, 2x and 3x. To get 6x squared, you could do 1x times 6x. You could do 2x times 3x. There's a couple different possibilities there. So guess and check can be a little frustrating on this problem, because if you said, I think it's going to be 6x and x, then you wouldn't be able to get the pieces to all fit together correctly. But if you decided it was 2x and 3x, then the pieces would fall together. So sometimes guess and check can be a little frustrating. Factor by grouping is always going to work no matter what. So find your pair of numbers, split your middle term, factor by grouping, collapse it down.